Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to take a moment to say thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to say thank you to our great platinum sponsors, including Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Gipper, sports graphics made incredibly simple. Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. And Camp Mobile, where leaders communicate better. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Today, we're visiting the great state of Washington and an old friend, Lisa McCullough. Lisa is a certified master athletic administrator. She's currently the assistant athletic director at the Bush School in Seattle, but she's got quite a background as an athlete, as a coach, as an international school administrator. So we're excited to have you on the show. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, as you know, it's a busy time for ADs as we're charging into the spring seasons. So let's get started. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, and maybe a little bit about your travels around the world that brought you to the Bush School.
Well, it's a very extensive story, as you know, Jake. And in fact, I just wrote a little essay on it. So I've got some little notes. But anyway, grew up in Western Pennsylvania, in and around Pittsburgh. Big Steelers fan, ice hockey, Penguins, Pirates. Grew up watching all of that. Went to the University of Pittsburgh. Graduated with my bachelor's in education for physical education. Did some teaching in and around the area, and then got married, had a couple of kids, and got sent off to Germany in 1994 for my husband's job, and took a little sabbatical, learned German, so fairly fluent in German. Spent 3 years there, came back with another little baby, spent some time in Michigan, just kind of substituting and being a mom. Came back to Pittsburgh after 3 years and did kind of the same thing. A lot of substituting, did a long-term stint as a German teacher, which was interesting. And then we were off again, back to Germany in 2003. The kids were older. We ended up in Dusseldorf, where the international school is. And being a stay-at-home mom, expat wife, trying to find things to do, I became a volunteer at the international school in their sports department, specifically for their sports club to start with. It was attached and sponsored solely by the school, and they played local teams. And then kind of just developed into a part-time position. I was at one time their booster club president, so I was very involved in that. And then I was asked to come on part-time as an athletic administrator, assistant, and then it kind of just developed. We built a new gym, and in the process of doing that, we had to set up temporary housing, so to speak, for our gym at our soccer fields, which was about 2 kilometers away. And we had to bus our kids from the main campus to the gym. And so I was brought on board as full-time. I rode the bus with the kids, but then I just stayed on as the full-time athletic administrative assistant. In and around 2015, our AD kind of decided he was going to move on, and the position opened up, and as we all do, we all apply for those open positions. But I came to find out you needed a master's degree, which I didn't have at the time. So I went in search of a master's degree, found myself at Ohio University in their well-developed, highly esteemed program, and I did 2 years there, graduated with honors in 2018. Um, at that time, then I was looking for another kind of step up, and I got in touch with, well, he got in touch with me, an old friend from Germany. He was my first AD there. And I was actually one of his booster club parents. And he contacted me. He had an open position as the assistant here at the Bush School, interviewed with them, and found myself moving back to the States. And here I've been for 3 years.
Wow, what a whirlwind of experiences. I mean, again, across the board, including that very important booster parent organization. Talk a little bit about, I guess, the differences that an international school athletic director deals with that we don't see here domestically, and maybe the opposite of that. What are some things here in the States that just don't happen in the international school setting?
Well, in the international school setting, um, with our interscholastic sports, the differences are we do a lot of kind of weekend tournaments where you will either host or go to another international school, which means you're crossing borders, taking bus rides of 4 to 5 hours, and then you stay overnight. So you'll play games on a Friday afternoon, evening, go home with your guest, your host family as a student, and then you come back the next morning and play another round of games, and then you're on the bus back to your home country, home city. We also have multi-level, multi-gender sports tournaments that go on at the end of each season, where we would host up to 8 schools, boys and girls. It could be JV and varsity as well. So you're actually running 4 tournaments at the same time if you're hosting. So it can get complicated, homestays, transportation. As far as the booster club is concerned, a lot of meals prepared, a lot of concession stands, ordering, supplies and knowing that how much you need. Hopefully you get the number right and you don't have to go out and purchase more, or you don't have a lot of leftovers so that need to be stored.
Yeah, I've heard about talking to a couple of international ADs over the years, those tournaments, just the logistical planning for the number of teams, as you mentioned. Sometimes it's varsity and JV. Frequently, it's boys and girls teams, and just the fans, as you said, the concessions. And that's the norm. That's not the exception. So,
Right.
what a great training ground, battlefield to become an athletic director. Lisa, in our profession, we always talk about the importance of leadership and particularly mentorship. So I'm curious, who were some of your mentors growing up? Maybe teachers or coaches that you had, or maybe even people that you worked with or worked for. The expression I like to use is, I still hear those voices in my head. So whose voice do you still hear?
Well, I mean, my parents are great role models just as a work ethic, and just being there for support and cheering me on as I went through my career and life. More recently, my mentors, great friend of mine, one of my first ADs at Dusseldorf, Frank Tashan, who happens to be right now the head of school there. So he's kind of developed. He left and went to US Soccer here in the States, and then he went back and then became the interim head of school, and now is the full-on head of school there. So he still is a great mentor to me. I reach out to him once a month or so. We check in families and jobs and how everything's going. Also a great mentor is my AD right now, Joe Ito. Again, I wouldn't be here without him. And he's great support, especially, going through the CMAA process. Yeah, right now, those are my go-to people. I have a lot of other kind of fringe, but those are definitely the most important.
I appreciate you sharing that. And again, I love to hear about it. It's a great reminder for all of us that we didn't get here by ourselves. We had people that were helping us along the way. We mentioned that you are, in fact, a certified master athletic administrator. You went to the Ohio University program, and I think that's one that when you're done, you not only have your master's, you've also met all the qualifications to sit for the CAA exam. So take our listeners through that journey. We've got a lot of younger ADs, and I think it's important for them to understand that journey of getting involved, with your state association, with the national association. So just talk a little bit about how that played out, and maybe share a little nugget about your CMAA project.
Well, as you mentioned, the Ohio University program actually works in conjunction with the NIAAA and their leadership training program. A lot of the things that we do, the courses that we take, integrate a lot of the leadership training courses. And when you come out, you do have enough credits to sit for that CAA exam. I found it very helpful. It was very insightful to put theory to practice. So I had a lot of practical experience, but not a lot of theoretical. So it really helped you to think. Working in groups, we worked in small groups and large groups, which is true to the scenario that you do in your real life. So you don't do this by yourself. You always have someone or someone's helping you out. My CMAA project came about recently because of COVID. We ended up doing a virtual interactive athletic celebration in the fall. We did it the week before Thanksgiving. So it was a week-long celebration. We had each day had a specific either physical or spirit challenge that the community could interact with and send photos or information to us on our Twitter or Instagram account, through email. And it all culminated in a Friday program that we did in our gymnasium in conjunction with our IT team, who set up a video production studio, basically. We did a Bush version of Jeopardy. So everything in and around Bush was geared to that Jeopardy kind of layout and board. And we found great online resource to do the board. And it was a lot of fun. We had a socially distanced audience of our third grade class. But as I did it, I kind of gathered all the information. It went great. We actually did a mass mailing. We mailed out popcorn, microwave popcorn, a small sticker sheet, and a postcard reminding everybody of what each day was. So it was great fun. At the end, I did a survey. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation for the project for my oral presentation. And I did that presented in February to the panel from the certification committee.
And again, a couple of things for our listeners. The project that Lisa just described is the best kind of project. It was something that she felt passionate about. It was at her own school. She had that vision, and then she basically documented and told that story. You don't have to go out and come up with some kind of, wild theoretical thing. As Lisa mentioned earlier, application, making it practical is good. And then the second thing, I'm mad because I just rolled off of certification committee after about 9 years in December. So I didn't get a chance to sit in on that oral panel. I'm going to put you on the spot. Who are your reviewers?
I had Joey Stroy.
Right, from South Dakota.
Now I can't remember the other two gentlemen that were on the call. And of course, Cheryl Van Paris was
Right.
there. But they were very, very attentive, asked great questions at the end. And I can thank Joey for he was my advisor through the process. and he was great, very supportive, very insightful with helping me to decide on if I needed to make changes or adjustments. So
No, obviously you were in very good hands. Joey actually rolled into my position as co-vice chair. So congratulations on that.
thank you.
And as I always like to say, that CMAA puts you in a very elite group of athletic administrators. Statistically, only about 4% of athletic directors in the United States have earned that title. So well done.
Thank you.
Um, Lisa, one of the things we've tried to do with the podcast these last several months is to share this idea of what we call best practices. Now, you've certainly seen a lot of different programs in your travels, both domestically and internationally. And for our listeners, if you don't know, the Bush School is one of those independent schools. I humbly say, like my school in Tallahassee, that is looked upon as one of those schools that does things the right way. So, um, Lisa, what are a couple of things that, whether it's at the Bush School or another school, that you've seen that you can look at with equal parts pride and humility, and you can say, boy, we do this better than anybody else? What are a couple of best practices that you can share?
Um, One of the ones that comes to mind right away, and it's one of the things that I try to focus on, is communication. We try to communicate. We try to over communicate with our community, with our parents, with our students. And sometimes they do feel like they're bombarded by us, but we do put the information out there by email. We put it on our website. We put it on our internal portal where everybody gets the information, parents and students alike, faculty. But that is one of the best practices that I can say is just communicate as often and as early as possible when things are changed, when you're making updates, especially in this COVID time, because everything is moving. There are so many moving parts, and with the states changing things on a weekly, daily basis, you have to keep up and make sure that everybody understands what is expected, what the changes are, and yeah, those are my biggest things.
You mentioned COVID, which we're going to get to in just a second, but again, you're going to hate me. I'm going to put you on the spot again.
Okay.
That communication is just so important, and you used one of my favorite phrases: over communicate. Give our listeners an example, if you can, where that culture of over communication helped prevent what might have been a challenging fire to put out had you not had those systems in place. How did communication help out?
I mean, just as a general, communication helps out. I mean, we have so many moving parts with transportation and scheduling. If we had this recently, one of our buses, we outsource our buses at this time because we don't have big enough buses to socially distance. The bus broke down on the way here. They sent a replacement. It was too small. We were going to be running late, so we had to reach out not only to our parents, but to our opponent who we were traveling to. So when you can over communicate and get that information out as quickly as possible, then people are more apt not to come back to you and say, "But you didn't tell me. I didn't know." And the referees as well, any of the officials, to let them know that things are going to be delayed for a little bit. So those are really important situations where you need that. Or if we travel on the ferries as well to some of the schools. So if a ferry is running late or you miss the ferry, and the kids are coming back later than usual, the parents are waiting to pick them up. You need to communicate. So communication needs to come from the athletic department as well as from the coach, and obviously the players will contact their parents as well. But it should come from the top down, so that the parents know that we are in the loop and know what's going on.
Right. No, again, that's exactly what I was looking for. Those examples that we deal with every single day that, hey, when there's a hiccup, you need to communicate that to the stakeholders.
Mhm.
For our listeners, we're recording this episode on March 24th. So we're just a little bit past that 1 year anniversary of our good friend COVID. So, Lisa, we've been hearing how athletic directors responded, a year ago and again this fall, and now we're into the spring. Um, and we'd like to hear what's going on in the state of Washington, as well as at your school, and not just with return to play athletics, but also return to school. What's going on regarding COVID right now?
Well, in the state of Washington, it's kind of a mishmash depending on what type of school you are. Some of the public schools are still not back in-person school. They're still doing remote school. Some of the more private independent schools, such as Bush, are on a hybrid plan. We have our lower school kids in class 5 days a week. Our upper school, our 9 through 12, are on every other week, but not all at the same time. So this week they're on campus. Monday and Tuesday, our 9th and 11th graders are on campus. On Wednesday and Thursday, our 10th and 12th graders are on campus. And Friday, they have an asynchronous day, which means it's just a work day for them to get caught up with homework and stuff. So when they're not on campus, then they're all remote. And when the upper school's on campus, the middle school is fully remote, and vice versa. As far as sports, we are just finishing up our season 1, which is our fall sports. We're in 7-week seasons. We started in late February, and we're going to be finishing up here next week with our league playoffs. And then at the same time as the playoffs, season 2, our spring sports will start, and they'll go 7 weeks until the week of May 10th, when there'll be an overlap with our winter sports, which is our basketball. And we did that specifically because we weren't sure, with basketball being a high risk indoor sport, whether we were going to hit that phase for them to be able to participate and play. And it looks like we will be able to. We haven't been able to have any fans at our indoor games, but we are allowed outdoor games, especially in public places, to have small socially distant crowds.
When you were able to resume sports, obviously much later in the calendar, but for your season 1 fall sports, what was the the atmosphere like with the kids and the coaches and even the parents? How was that all received when it finally came back?
They were happy to be back, and it's funny because they come back and we have got to go through all these protocols. We've got to do temperature check and health questions, screening, and they're all wearing masks, so you really can't see their faces, but you can see their eyes, and that they're excited to be there and to be involved. We get lots of communication from parents that they're so happy that the kids are back doing something, and it's changed their attitudes at home and with their studies. It's just a great thing to get them back into the courts and the playing fields and outdoor running cross country and whatever, to get that physical activity so that they can burn off that stress that they're feeling from all this remote schooling and time on Zoom.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't even imagine that. I remember what it was like a year ago at our school, where we lost spring sports entirely. But,
Mhm.
Florida, we were able to start pretty much on schedule. We delayed a little bit, but as I told you before the show, we've wrapped up winter sports, and we're probably about halfway or more through spring, and looking at state playoffs next month, excuse me. So again, all the best as you guys continue to have your sports year unfold over the space of about 20 weeks or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lisa, another question we've been asking the athletic directors revolves around this idea of social awareness and social justice, if you will. And my question has been this: what are some things that we can do as athletic administrators? What are some things that we can do better in with our kids, our coaches, our community? How can we do a better job being socially aware?
I think just listening, and people want to be heard. Make sure that you're researching, what's going on in your community. Our kids are very socially aware. They know, obviously, we live in Seattle, we work in Seattle, and it was a big concentration of things that were going on in the summer. So we're quite well aware of that here with the social justice. Our students have groups or clubs that they get together in and talk about it. We do a lot of internally with our coaches and our faculty and staff, a lot of diversity training, diversity and equity training. So we look at those day-to-day issues of, social justice and, perception and things like that.
Well, that's great to hear that you've got the student organizations because the student voice is so important in all of this. Lisa, this has been great. Finally, getting to talk with you. We've been in touch with each other, through, various online platforms, but it was great seeing you and talking with you and hearing about your school. But we're not done yet. And before we go into our final segment, the AD's Toolbox, I've got to ask you, again, you podcast listeners, you can't see this, but when you watch this Zoom on YouTube in a couple of weeks, you'll be able to see over Lisa's right shoulder. Is that a mascot of some kind on your bulletin board? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's our mascot, Blaze. He is that's a cutout that we I think we purchased or donated money for him to be a member of the audience at the Mariners games in the summer. So he had a seat at the Mariners games, and as you know, professional sports obviously haven't had a lot of spectators either, and they would put these cutouts in the stadium chairs. And so Blaze had the honor of attending several Mariners games, and now he's come back home and he resides on my bulletin board.
No, that is very cool. Okay. Well, as I said, our final segment is what we call the new athletic director's toolbox. And what I'm going to do right now is challenge you to send out a brand new AD on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Lisa McCullough's athletic director toolbox?
Oh, 3 items. Are we talking about skills?
It's whatever 3 things you feel are the most important.
Okay, so my 3 things: communication, time management, and organization. So those are my three tools.
Great minds think alike. I think those would be at the top of my list as well. Okay. Lisa, thanks so much for being on the podcast. And as I mentioned, continued success and good luck as your seasons unfold.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thanks for having me.
It was great. To our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these interviews are being uploaded to the FIAAA Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Thanks for listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD.